All right, let's go ahead and get started. Can you hear me okay, Rhonda? Okay, perfect. Hi there. Okay, well, welcome to our week 3 live session for Design 105. This week we are going to be learning some very powerful tools for working with multi-page documents in particular, as we are going to be reproducing a newsletter. Oh yeah, I just barely started the audio, Rhonda. You would have wouldn't have been able to hear me before anyway. No problem. All right, so before we jump into that though, I want to just go over a couple of quick announcements as usual. And the first one is I finished grading everything that had been submitted as of yesterday afternoon, and that would include anything that was either the week 2 work that was submitted, and also any revisions or late submissions for week 1. So as usual, make sure to go in there and click on the grade itself, and also make sure to click on show rubric so that you can see any specific comments on that. And just like always, you're more than welcome to revise your assignments and resubmit them if you lost any points and would like to get those points back. And I would be more than happy to regrade those. I'll be grading again on Monday. And so I will grade anything that is resubmitted this week on next Monday. And you can get any points back that you may have lost. All right. Also, we will be working in we'll be doing our multi-session on Thursday from 10 a.m. until noon Mountain Time, as usual. And so you're more than welcome to come in there if you want some one-on-one help from me. You've also got all the rest of the multi-sessions available throughout the week, which again, the schedule is here in the announcements. You just scroll down here to the 100 level multi-session schedule mod 10. And then here, I've also posted our learning coaches schedule for this week. So Christy is going to be available on Wednesday from noon to 7, and then Thursday from noon to 5, and her contact information is down there, so you can reach out to her if you want to get together and get some help from her as well. Oh, I'm sorry to hear your piece is not working right, Susan. If you definitely contact IT about that. They should be able to help you out. Let's see. So I can't remember specifically what was going on with your package, Rhonda, but we can, if you want to, if we have some time at the end of the class today, I can take a look at it with you if you'd like, with the packaging. It may be that you're just zipping the wrong part of it. I've seen that before. People are zipping a specific aspect, but I have to take a look because I can't remember exactly what was up with yours. All right. Okay, so just so you guys know, we're gonna start off today by talking about elements of design, which is going to be, again, more like just like how we talked about the principles of design last week. This is going to be more theory based, so as far as creating good designs rather than technically based, like what we're doing in InDesign. So we're going to spend a few minutes on that, talk about just some good design concepts for you to be keeping in mind when you're working on your pieces. And then we're going to get into a couple of new new aspects of InDesign. One's called master pages, and then one is called, we're going to also look at one called the baseline grid. Okay, and we're going to be working with spreads for the first time this week as well. Now, for this week's assignment, where in week 1 and week 2 you were doing your own designs, right? You're coming up with your own menu designs. So all I can do is demonstrate the tools and techniques you would use, but I can't actually, make your menu or demo your menu because it's your design. This week's a little different, and so is week 4, in that you are actually reproducing a design. So it's already been designed. You're just going to recreate it following some technical guidelines. Because of that, and because there are such specific technical guidelines for it, I'm actually going to do the whole week 3 assignment in our live session today. So just keep that in mind. When you're doing yours, you can pull up this recording and you can literally follow along with what I'm doing, because I'm going to be doing step by step the entire thing from beginning to end. I'm going to do the same thing next week in week 4, because just like so weeks 1 and 2 we're doing the menu. Weeks 3 and week 4 are both doing a newsletter. So yeah, you should be able to see a very specific demonstration we're doing, and I do that because, like I said, this week it's really focusing a lot on these technical aspects, and so I want to make sure that you guys are really getting these steps to put together these technical aspects of it the way they need to be done, and then you'll be able to implement them in your own things going forward. All right, and yes, Susan, you're right. You're supposed to save it, and then you package it, and then you compress it. So it's 3 different steps. Okay, so before we go into that, though, we are going to be talking about the elements of design. Now, these elements of design, you're going to hear them sometimes kind of worded in different ways. Sometimes you'll see, like, for example, in 109, they take line and kind of break it out into 2 things, which is point and line, and they merge together color and value. But essentially, these 5 things we're going to be talking about are the 5 elements that you're going to be dealing with design all the time, okay? Now, the difference between the elements of design and the principles of design. The elements of design are the actual things in your design, right? And then the principles of design is what we are doing with those things, okay? So, for example, color is one of my elements of design, and we use the principle of contrast when working with color, right? Line is one of the elements of design, and we would use repetition or alignment or even contrast, when working with line, right? So these are kind of like our objects, and principles are our tools, right? These are these are the things we're acting upon, and principles is how we're doing those actions. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's talk about these, and we're going to talk about a few of them kind of specifically related to some of the things that you may have gotten feedback on in the menus as well. But our first one we're going to talk about is line, okay? So line, it's one of the most important elements of design. Line defines a subject's form or shape on a flat 2-dimensional surface. Lines can be thick or thin, smooth or jagged, rigid or mechanical, or organic or hand-drawn. And then the quality of a line has the ability to express psychological characteristics of a composition to an audience, right? So here we have various lines, and they have very different characteristics to them, but they also get different feelings because of those characteristics. We may use clean, thin lines to create a modern feeling, organized feeling, simple feeling design, right? Jagged lines get used quite often to give people a feeling of unease, a feeling of tension, right? An organic hand-drawn line might give a feeling of craftiness, of homemade, that sort of thing. So the qualities of our lines can have a pretty strong psychological impact on the viewer. Now, there's 2 types of lines that I want to talk about in specific. And really all lines fall into one of these 2 categories. And that is what you would call explicit lines or implicit lines. And a way to think of that is lines that are actually a physical line that is there, and the other one is an implied line, where there's not actually a drawn line there, but we still see a line. As a human being, we kind of create our own line looking at it, okay? So let me give you an example of that. Just going to open up InDesign here. Okay, so I'm going to just draw 2 rectangles. And this rectangle, I am going to give a blue fill and a black stroke. Let's make it a little bit thicker. And this rectangle, I'm just going to give a blue fill. Okay, I'm going to hit W so we don't see the preview. So this rectangle has an example of an explicit line, a line that is actually there, right? There's a black line moving around the outside of this blue shape that makes that I can see. I can see the line very clearly. This rectangle is an example of what would be an implied line, meaning there is no actual line on the edges of this rectangle, but we see a line there. We see a line where the blue ends and the white begins, right? In reality, you know, there's not like this drawn line there. It's just blue ends, white begins, but there's still a line as far as our minds are concerned. Does that make sense? So based upon that, we have a lot of implied lines in our design. For example, the edge of the page is a line. You know, it may not have an actual black line around it, but we see a line where the edges of the pages are. Our margins can be are implied lines. The edges of photos are implied lines. If I take text and let's go ahead and just fill this. So for example, this text here, I see a line right along the left edge here because they're all lined with each other, right? They're all lined up perfectly. So my mind sees a line running along the left side of this text. There's also lines running underneath all this text too, right? It's like if we were writing a lined paper, but there's no actual line there, but you know, the text creates its own lines. If I were to center this, then now I've got kind of an imaginary line that I can see going down the middle of this, right? Because it's all centered. If I right aligned it, same sort of thing. So those are all examples of implied lines, meaning that there's not actually a visual line there, but we need to be aware that there are still connections that are line-like, and so we need to be thinking of those things and following rules accordingly. So any questions on that part of it before we talk about some of the other ways we can use these lines? Okay. So I'm going to pretend this little blue rectangle here is a photograph. I mean, it could be a rectangle, doesn't matter. But I want to use, that's what alignment is doing, is taking advantage of these implied lines, these lines that our mind creates. This right now has no real implied line. There's a rectangle over here, there's text over here. So if I use alignment, pop it up like this, now my mind has created an implied line that runs across the top of these. They're connected across the top by an invisible line. Grid lines would definitely be an implied line. Yes, that's a great example of one. Now these are aligned on the bottom, so it's kind of an invisible line running along there. Now they're aligned on the left, so there's kind of an invisible line. So when we're talking about alignment, we're basically creating these invisible lines that connect different elements in our design. Okay, and grid lines are a perfect example of that, where we're setting up a grid so that we see lines, and then we use those to align things, and then we hide that grid. And even though there's no physical lines there anymore, the result of doing that is still left over, and that is these kind of implied lines where things just feel like they line up well together, even though there's not physical lines there. Now with text, there's something we need to be careful with lines. And some of you may have seen this in your feedback on your menus. Text needs a little bit of padding, a little bit of a margin between its edges and any sort of a line, any sort of an implied line or a real line. So for example, if I take this text and I just shove it right up here in this corner, you can see that this is not a very pleasant reading experience anymore. It's difficult to like read this because it's right up against the edge there. This implied line of the edge of the page is crowding my text and making it harder to read. But if I just leave some space, which is a margin, now it becomes so much more enjoyable and pleasant to read. Okay. It really depends on the design, Tanya. Sometimes grid lines, I would say no. It depends on your situation. What you mean by grid lines? The default grid where it just puts a bunch of squares there, no. But you're going to learn later on how to create your own custom grids that work better for that. So here's another example of where you need to be careful with text getting too close to another line. Okay, I'm going to come here. I'm going to just create an image frame and place an image in that. Okay, so here I have this text and this image. If I put my text right up against the image like that, just like when I was putting it at the edge of the page, it's not as easy or enjoyable to read. We need to have a little bit of space between the line at the edge of that photo and the line at the edge of my text. Ron, I'd have to look at my notes for sure. I can't remember specifically what yours was, but we can take a look later if you want. But does that make sense what I'm saying here? You know, if you just shove text up against a line, whether it's the edge of the page, whether it's an image, whatever it is, it's not gonna be as readable. And that's all sides of text. You wouldn't want it to be like this either, right? I'd want to just give it that little bit of padding, a little bit of space to give it more readability. Now, one other example I'll give you is when people put a colored background behind text. Okay, now let's go ahead and make that lighter so we can actually see it better. It's an example of poor contrast. Let's bring that down. Okay, so it's very common for people sometimes to put like a background behind text like this. This is not how you'd want to do it though. This is too tight around that text. I've got, again, an implied line at the edge of my pink rectangle, and that implied line is getting too close to my text. I need a little bit of padding. So there's a couple of ways I could do that. I'm going to show you one way that's a great way to do it later on when I'm demonstrating the assignment. So I'll just show you the second way right now. And that is I could, rather than fill in my text frame, I could just create a separate rectangle that's bigger, right? And then I have more custom control of the size of it. And then take my text and just place it in that rectangle. And like I said, I've got control over the sizing of this rectangle since it's a separate entity now. And I can just make sure to give it a little more padding. And that's going to make this a more enjoyable reading experience, to have that space between the line at the edge of the rectangle and the line of the text itself. Does that make sense? Yeah. So those are some things to keep in mind. And when we do our assignment, when I demonstrate it today, you're gonna see some ways to do this, and we're gonna look at some techniques for keeping those lines from getting together. But yeah, that's just one thing to really keep in mind. Be thinking about those implied lines, and with text in particular, be thinking about keeping text away from those implied lines. Okay. All right, so coming back over here, let's move on to our next one, which is shape. So shape is a two-dimensional area that's confined by a line, right? And that line can either be an actual line or an implied line. And shapes are created when the ends of lines are joined to enclose areas. And shapes can be geometric, or they can be freeform or organic in nature. So here's some examples of some geometric shapes versus some freeform shapes. And you can see the geometric shapes they're all the basic shapes we learned in kindergarten, or some sort of like combination of them, right? So here's half of a circle. Here's a circle with half circle with a rectangle on it, right? But they're all those basic geometry that, the basic shapes are built from the basic shapes that we learned when we were very young. where the freeform shapes are going to be more organic, more abstract, just drawn by hand, sort of a feeling to them. And they have very different impacts, right? A geometric shape feels scientific, it can feel modern, it can feel clean, it can also feel confining, you know, it depends on how you do it. Where the freeform ones can feel more natural, can feel creative, can feel messy, right? It just depends on what we want to go for there. But when we're working with our shapes, we're thinking about what the impact we want of our communication, and working with shapes that help create that impact. Okay. Next, we have texture. So texture can either, there can actually be the physical texture or a visual texture, right? So right now, I see, you know, these 6 different blocks on my computer screen that have different textures, but obviously if I were to reach out and touch that, they'd all feel exactly the same. They feel like glass because it's just my computer screen. But because of my experience in the real world, looking at those things gives me different feelings because I can imagine the way that they feel, right? Some things just feel soft, some things feel rich. So you'll see like wooden textures and designs and stuff. But if you're doing printing, the actual texture is a part of it. The way that the paper feels, the way that the cardstock feels. And when I used to work for a graphic design studio, that was a very real consideration. We would go and touch these papers and stuff when doing these high-end projects to make sure we were getting the right feel for what we wanted for our project. So texture can either be something that's a physical thing if you're working with something printed, and it's also a visual thing no matter how you're working, because just the look of the texture still has an impact on people. The roughness, the smoothness, the shagginess, all those things. Okay. Any questions on texture? Okay. So our next one is color. Now, color is an exciting one. It's probably the first one that most people think of when they think about elements of design. Color is also a very complex one, and in a great way. It's a fun way. But we don't just randomly pick our colors or just do what sounds fun. You know, we're very much considering the message we want to convey from our colors, because colors can have a psychological effect. You're going to take a whole class on color theory later on where you're going to learn a lot more about these things. But we'll talk just briefly about some of it now. Like it says, color can convey a message. It can change or emphasize the meaning of a word or an image. So if I make a word red, obviously that draws attention, has a different feeling to it than if it's black. In design, color should support the message, whether it's an advertisement, a website, a logo, or persuasive text. Now, the meaning of color and the emotions conveyed vary according to culture. So it's important that we understand our audience's perception of color as it pertains to our subject matter in general. So what that means, there are certain psychological effects, and again, you'll learn a lot more about this in your color theory class. There are certain psychological effects that certain colors have on people that are just universal. Like, for example, the colors red and yellow tend to make people hungry. That's just something that they do. They make people hungry. So I want you to think about all the fast food restaurants, you know, and you'll notice that most of them use the colors red, yellow, or both in some way because of that effect, because that makes it so you're looking at their advertising, you're looking at their signs, and it tends to make people hungry. Outside of that, though, there are a lot of things that colors do that are different depending upon the audience, depending upon the people. Now, there's if you look at that from a large scope, like from countries, this is a really cool chart here that goes over, this goes over the meanings of color in different parts of the world, okay? And you're gonna see that some of them are very different. For example, if you go to pink, you know, in Western culture, which is ours, it means love, romance, femininity, childhood, babies, nurturing, sweetness, Valentine's Day. Well, if you go to Belgium, pink is the color used for boys. If you go to South Korea, pink means trust. If you go to Thailand, it's the color for Tuesday. You doing the Tuesday special for a restaurant in Thailand? Pink. So again, these colors don't have the universal meaning that sometimes people think they do. In Japan, for example, white is the color for death and mourning, where for us, black, the color for death and mourning. There's some very, very distinct meanings for colors that are very foreign to us in different places of the world. And a lot of these meanings come from, meanings that we may take for granted as being just the way it is, come from very specific sources and are not just the way they are. Like, for example, I don't know if you guys know this already or not, but the concept that we have in our country of like blue being for boys and pink being for girls, that did not exist before the early 1900s. It was from an advertising campaign. Before, if you were to go to 1870 and say, hey, I got you this blue thing because you're having a boy, they'd be like, I have no idea what you mean by that. It would mean nothing to them. And an advertising agency that was putting together ads to sell baby clothing, baby toys, baby furniture, they thought, hey, maybe it would help us sell stuff if we kind of designated a color for boys and a color for girls. And when they first put it out, guess what? Pink was for boys, blue was for girls. And after playing with that for a while, they thought, well, let's try switching that, see how that works. And they did blue for boys, pink for girls. They got a hit with that one. And now, 100 years later, most people in this country have a sense that that's somehow ingrained in the human mind, but it's not. It's just our culture, just what we learned growing up. And so these colors, learning these things for your audience is very important. Now, this is a very broad thing, right? Because we're talking about different countries. Maybe you won't ever be doing a design in Thailand, right? But there's also very specific meanings for colors within the subcultures within our own country, right? Different industries, different types of like social groups, lots of different areas where colors have different meanings. And I'll give you an example of that. In the business world, like especially in finance, you're talking about money, you're talking about business and accounting, the color red has a very specific meaning. Does anyone know what the color red means if you're dealing with money? If you're dealing with your accounting, you're dealing with your bank account, what does red mean? Negative. Exactly. Red means bad. It means you're losing money. It means you are in the negative. So that's why for a long time, most banks and stockbrokers and all those things just completely avoided the color red when it came to their marketing and identity work. And that's why you see things like, here's the color blue tends to make people feel calm and trusting. And I want you to think about how many banks out there use blue. And so there was one bank, though, a while ago, Wells Fargo was redoing their entire logo and identity. And the designer that was doing it for them basically had to weigh the pros and cons and said, okay, so I get the fact that red has a negative connotation in your industry. I understand that. However, if we use red in our logo, we are going to stand out. We're going to stand out from the competition and everyone's going to notice us because no one else is using red because of this negative connotation. So as designers, sometimes we have to like make those decisions. Say, okay, here's the negative side that would come from doing this, but here's the positive side that would come from doing this. Which one's more important? And then make a decision based on that. Yeah, basically the same with the engine. Yep. So anyway, color, there's a lot that goes into color choices and a lot that goes into color usage. And again, you'll learn a lot more of that going forward, but color is one of our primary elements of design for those reasons. Now, the last one I'm going to talk about is value. And value and color, they go hand in hand. Value is basically the darkness, lightness, or and contrast of different colors, right? So for example, this man's face here it's technically all the same color, the same hue. It's all gray, right? If I were to ask them, what color is this? They'd say gray. What color is this? Gray. But they're different values of gray. Some of them are light gray, some of them are dark gray, some of them are medium gray. And by having those different values, we get texture and we can see a face, right? Same with here. These are all green, but they're different values of green. These are all yellow, but different values of yellow, okay? So the value is going to have to be that darkness and that lightness, and how those darkness and lightnesses are working together amongst our colors. Okay. So those are our 5 elements we're talking about: line, shape, texture, color, and value. And then so those are the kind of our toolbox. That's what we're working with. And then we're using those principles of design that we talked about last week: contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity, to decide how to use those elements of design. What are the lines going to be like? How are they going to work together? What are the colors going to be like? How are they going to work together? And so on and so forth. Okay, does that make sense? Any questions at all on those, on the elements of design? All right. Okay, cool. Well, so let's jump into what we are doing this week. Let's start off by just taking a look at our discussion. So our discussion is drawing off of our conversation we just had on the elements of design and also on the principles of design. So I'm gonna skip over the background, but please do make sure to read that. And I'm gonna go down to the prompt. So the prompt says, for today's discussion, visit one of these 2 websites. There's 2 links here, and look through the menu art displayed there. Choose an example that illustrates either a powerful use or a poor use of the elements of design. So you're choosing either one. We're going to look at my post in a second. I did both. You don't need to do both. You can either find a really great use of the elements of design or a really bad use of the elements of design. Okay. And then you're going to embed the image in the post, and you're going to discuss your evaluation of the menu. Should there have been more design elements used? Should they have been used differently? You know, how and where do you think things could have been improved? How well do you think they did a great job? And then how do you think that they were used in conjunction with the principles of design, right? Like, how do these things work well with our contrast or proximity, okay? So we're kind of analyzing these pieces based upon these elements and principles of design. So to give you an example, like I said, on my discussion post, I did 2. I did a positive and a negative. So this was my positive. And on here, a couple of the elements that I would point out in talking about this, one is shape, okay? So notice you've got these circles around salads, entrees, and roll-ups, right? But then they continued on with that circle shape outside of that to really make it a theme throughout the menu. Notice the bowl is a circle up here. This bowl down here is a circle. The little dip thing is a circle. The ends of the spring rolls are circles. They've got circles over here in the badges. So they've created a repetition of circles that ties the images to the text and brings it all together. That repetition of shape is working really well for this. Another would be color. And again, also this one would have to do with repetition and contrast. Notice that they've got this circle around salads is green, and so is every salad name, right? Yeah, Susan makes me hungry to look at this, huh? So every salad's name is green. All the entrees names are this dark red that's entrees. All the roll-ups are this orange. And then the kind of miscellaneous, the stuff that doesn't fit into those categories, all have their own color, which is blue. Desserts, drinks, sides, okay? So they've used a repetition of color to make it easy for me to navigate through the menu and see what I'm looking for. They've also used a contrast of color to make it clear where one thing ends and another begins, right? So that's just a couple of examples of how you could talk about this menu, talking about the way they're using their elements of design in order to work well with the principles of design in order to create a good menu, okay? Now down here, I've got my bad example. Don't look at it too long or it'll give you a headache. Yeah, I'm sure you guys have all gotten these ones in the mail, things like this. It's just so much information crammed onto a page with no real design, concept. that I mean, I would have to really, really want to have this information in order to force myself to read all this, right? It's not inviting to bring in at all. We've got a lot of these we've got this distracting shapes over here, and they're all crowding in on my text, giving the text very little breathing room. The lines are all crowding in around it. The color, right, gives me anxiety too, India. Look at this list here. This list just rotates between red, black, and green, but for no reason. The green things don't have anything to do with each other. The black things don't have anything to do with each other. The red things don't have anything to do with each other. They're just going to rotate through those colors. They don't do it anywhere else on the page. There's no theme in that. It just does it and has no purpose whatsoever. So, you know, in all, this is it's confusing. It's stressful, and for most people, this is going to go right in the trash. Right? We want something that's going to invite us to read it. Notice all the white space. Notice the proximity tying things together, leaving white space between them. Compared to that, very, very, very little. Right? So, again, you don't need to do both. I did both of them on mine, but that's not required. What's required is a good or a bad, whatever you'd like. And that's our discussion for this week. Any questions on that at all? All right. Let's go take a look at our assessment then. So our assessment this week is not a quiz. It's a little project. It's a fast one. But I'm going to demonstrate it because there's some specific things that need to be done in here. I want to make sure you guys know how to do well. Now, one thing that I want to make clear right in the beginning, because this is where I think most people get confused with this assessment. Down here, there is a sample document, okay? So you've got a sample document you can download. What that's for, part of what we're doing this week is we are importing our styles from one document to another, okay? So last week we made our text styles. We made paragraph styles or character styles. Well, sometimes we have those styles saved in one document and we want to create a new document, but we want to use the styles we already made, right? An example of that would be, let's say that I had a client come to me and they were like, oh, this is just a one-off job. We have a regular design firm we work with, but they're too busy right now. And we'd like you just to create this quick advertisement for us. So I go ahead and I do that. And when I'm in my advertisement creation, I create some text styles for the advertisement. Well, then let's say they come back 6 months later and say, you know what, that last advertisement was so successful, we'd like to do a follow-up one, but it's for the same thing. So make sure that they're tied together. Well, so now I'm going to want to use those same styles because they're tied together, but those styles are saved in the document that I made before. So what we're going to do with this, one of the things we're going to do with this is we're going to see how to import styles from one InDesign document to another, okay? So since we're doing that, the instructions tell you that you can either use your week 2 menu that you did last week, or there's the sample document. So the reason there's both choices, you know, styles can sometimes be difficult to get a hang of. So some of you may have done your week 2 document and the styles may not have been done correctly. So if you go and look in your grade and you got full points on your styles portion of the rubric, you can use your menu from week 2 for this. If you go look at your grade and you didn't get full points on the styles portion of it, use the sample document here because it has the styles set up correctly. Does that make sense? Any questions on that part of it? Okay. So what we're doing here, we're creating a postcard, and this postcard is for one of the restaurants that we did in week 2. So again, it's either going to be the restaurant you chose if you're using your week 2 assignment, or it's going to be, in the example one is for Starlight Bistro, okay? So we're making a postcard for a buy one, get one off special that they're having. And the instructions you can see here has the setup for the postcard, and then the instructions for how to do it down here. But again, I'm going to demonstrate this because I want to make sure you guys can all see how it works. Okay. What's your question, Rhonda? Oh, no problem. Okay, so everyone's going to download the download at the bottom of it, okay? The download has the text you need, so everyone's going to download the download file. But in that download file, so here I just downloaded it. This is what it is. There's a folder and a Word document. The Word document is the text. So if you're using your own week 2 assignment, this is all you need. If you're using the sample one, that's in here. You can see there's a sample document, there's the Starlight Bistro logo, and there's an image for you. Okay. So if you're using your own, you can ignore the folder and just worry about the text file. Okay. So let me show you this sample. I'm going to use the sample one because I don't have a week 2 menu. I want you just to see there's nothing in this sample one other than styles. So if you open it up, you don't even need to open it up. But if I open it, you'll see it's just a blank page. But if I go over to my paragraph styles, there's some paragraph styles in place. There's a character style in place. And if I go to my swatches, I've got a few custom colors that have been set up that work with those styles. Okay, so that's all it is. It's just there for the styles. So here's how we get started with our postcard. I'm going to hit Create New. Now the size for the postcard is 6 inches wide and 4.25 inches high. So we're doing a postcard. It's got a 0.125 inch bleed. It has margins that are 0.25 inches. Now we've been doing 1/2 inch margins. They're smaller this time because it's a smaller piece of paper, right? We're not doing as big of a project, and so we want smaller margins. And then it's supposed to have the spreads unchecked, so facing pages unchecked, and 2 pages. One's for the front of the postcard, one's for the back. So 6 inches by 4.25 inches, 2 pages, no facing pages, 1/4 inch margins, and 0.125 inch bleed. That's the whole setup. When I click Create, here's my postcard. Okay, and you can see it's 2 pages, ready for me to go. Now, the first thing I need to do is import my styles. So this is the step where you're either going to use that sample document, or you're going to use your week 2 menu. The way to do it is very, very easy. You need to open up the paragraph styles panel. You can actually do it from either the paragraph or character styles panel, but open one of them. If you don't have it out, you can just go to Window and Styles and get to it right in there. From one of your styles menus, you're going to click these 3 lines. No, facing pages is turned off on this one, Susan. So here, you're going to click these 3 lines up here, and that is going to open our menu for this panel. In the menu for the panel, there are 2 options here: load paragraph styles and load all text styles. I mean, we're going to want to do all text styles, then it'll get paragraph and character, right? So I'm just going to click that, and it's going to say, okay, so where's the document you want to load them from? So I'm going to browse either to your sample document or to your week 2 menu if you're using that, and then click Open. It reads that document and shows you any styles that are available to import. I could uncheck some of these if I didn't want some of them, but I'm going to leave them all checked and just click OK. And there we go. I've imported all my styles, and it also imported those custom swatches because they're used in the style. It's smart enough to know if there's a color that's needed in the style, bring that color over too. Okay, so very simple. Again, just go into your styles panel, click the menu, load all text styles, browse to the file you're getting them from, and they'll import right over. Any questions on that part of it? All right. Now, the next step. The cover only has two things on it. The cover has a photo that's going to go all the way across the whole page from bleed to bleed, and some headline text. Okay. So for the cover, all I'm going to do is just go to my rectangle frame and make sure you're going all the way out to the bleeds. Don't just end at the edge of the page. I'm going to make a place, a image frame for my cover. And I'm going to go to File, Place. Yes, the red line's the bleed, Susan. And then whatever image you'd like to use that goes for your restaurant, feel free to use any of them you want. Doesn't matter. I'm going to use this one, and I'm going to tell it to fit in the frame. So that's my first step for my cover. My second step, I'm going to go to my download and open that Word document that has the text. So here's what's in that Word document. The photo side is just this text here. Buy one, get one half off. The mailing side is going to be this. It needs to have the logo. Don't put the word logo. Just needs to have the logo on there. Needs to have the address of your restaurant. Again, don't just put the word address. Pull up the address of your restaurant. And then it needs to have this text here. Okay. So for this side, we just need this. Buy one, get one half off. I'm going to copy that and go over here. And I'm going to make a text frame. Doesn't matter where I place it for now. I'll paste it in there. And then we need to use our styles. So we're not just importing the styles, we're using styles. So whatever style works best for making your text work the way you want it to. I'm going to go ahead and do a soft return before this and a soft return there to make that fit a little better. And tuck it up under here. Now I got to be careful with my contrast. You see how this green back there is making that G a little hard to read. So sometimes you kind of have to play with the placement or the color or put a banner behind it. One thing I could do to make this stand out a little bit more is just come over here and give it a white. Oh, I did that on the actual frame. I don't want to do that. Select my text. And let's just give it a white stroke. Now you don't often want a stroke on text, but sometimes for contrast over an image, it can be a useful tool. I'm just going to do a very small one though, a 1/2 inch. Like that. And you see how that makes that pop out a little better against that back there. Now I want this placed a little better though. Yeah, I'm not loving that placement. How about I just tuck it right in the bottom of this curve of that bowl? So I'm looking at lines. They've got a line here made by the pan. So I can kind of tuck my text down against that line. Give it a little place for it there. Yeah, I'd probably play with that more as mine, but good enough for the demo. So that's all we're doing for the cover. The cover's got the text and the image going across the whole thing. Now I'm going to move on to my second page. My second page needs to have the logo, and it needs to have these things here, okay? The address and that text. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to come over. Now it says in the instructions that this is not going to be mailed, so you don't need to worry about leaving a place for the stamp and the address. That's not a part of this. The whole back is something to be handed out. So you've got all the space to work with. So I'm working with my margins. I'm going to go and replace the word address with an actual address. I'm not going to look up the one though for time's sake. I'll just make one up. Okay. Now, when working with this text, I want you to be thinking about something called hierarchy. Does anyone know what's meant by hierarchy? hierarchy, in essence, is ranking things in importance. Exactly. So you got there, run it. What's most important? Okay. So I don't want to just stick this on like this. This is a big chunk of text, and most people are not going to read it. And most people are not going to get them. I mean, the first message in there is my address. That's not what I want people to think of first. So I would look through this and I would say, okay, so what is the most important stuff? Now, I'm going to just do a quick organizing here. I would personally think, for me, the most important message is this: buy one, get one half off. That's what I want people to see first. That's going to catch their attention. After that, I would say my most important thing is the details, right? What is it that they're getting and how do you get it? So I'd go down here and say, eat up our early bird specials, weekdays between 4:30 and 5:30 p.m. Buy one appetizer or main dish and get one half off. I would say that the next most important thing is my address. They need to know where to go to get it. And then this stuff down here, this is my legalese. This is the stuff you always see in small print at the bottom. It's important. It needs to be there, but it's not the sizzle. It's not what, I'm not so excited for people to see that it's not valid and already discounted at specials. That's just they just need to know it. It just needs to be there for legal purposes. So this is my least important stuff. So when working with my elements of design and my principles of design, I want to be thinking about this hierarchy and making it so that this is the order in which people go through my design, right? So I'd say, okay, well, this is what I want people to see first. So I'm going to put it right up here at the top, and I'm going to make it really stand out. I'm going to make it nice and big. Okay. This is where I want people to go next. So I'm going to make that really close to my headline. Maybe not that close, but I'll keep it close to my headline so that it's the next thing people see. And maybe I'll even just bold it so it stands out just a little bit more. Okay. Now my address, I want people to see that and it to be easy to find and clear. I don't really want it lost down here, but I don't want it to be the most important message. So I'm not even going to leave it there. I'm going to come up here. Maybe I just want to pop it in the corner. I'll just go there and I'll right align it. Whoops. I'll right align it, and I don't want that to be so big, so I'm going to abbreviate this because that gets there too. And then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to make that the body copy. Oh, but then I need to right align again. Oh, I hate when I roll my scroll over the text fonts. Okay, body copy, and then right align it. Yeah, we can put it at the bottom too. That's completely that is a completely valid decision. And that's the point. There's no right or wrong way to do it. It's a matter of finding one of the various ways that will accomplish what you're trying to accomplish, right? So this text, like I said, this is the one I'm not as concerned about at all. So I'm going to do something different here too. I'm going to make that shorter, and I'm going to make a new text frame that runs across the entire length here. And I'm going to copy this. Actually, first of all, I'm going to get rid of these returns. I want these to all be on one line when I'm done. And get rid of that, and I'm going to put it down here. And I'm going to apply my body copy style to it, and I'm going to apply the gray character one. And then I'm going to go down small. You don't really want to get any smaller than about an 8. 8 is about the smallest you want to get. Now I'm going to show you a trick. I want this to sit on that line down there. Notice that right now, it's up at the top of my text frame. By default, when you create text, that text goes to the top of the text frame. I can select the text frame, and I can go to Option, Text Frame Options. There's a lot of cool stuff in here. We're going to talk about another one later today. And I can change the alignment. This is the vertical justification, so up and down. I'm going to say I want this in the bottom. Now that's going to just stick it right down there on my margin, right? So that's looking pretty good so far. Now maybe I gotta have a logo on here. So maybe what I do now is let's shift this down a bit and let's pop a space for a logo here and go file and place, throw the logo in there, make sure we can see the whole thing. And maybe that's my postcard, right? Or maybe I want to indent this a little bit against the logo. So maybe I shift it over a little bit like so. Or take advantage of this white space right here. Maybe I look at an invisible line from the inside of this S going down to my B and do something like that, right? Yes, it's for the restaurant, the menu, yeah. So this would be a completed one. I would now just package this and submit it, and that would be an assessment, okay? Now, don't just copy my design, have fun with it, lay it out the way like Susan said. She would put this down the bottom. These can go in different ways. I just want you to be thinking about hierarchy, thinking about what's the most important part of the message and how do I want to make sure people get that. Make sense? All right. So any questions at all on the assessment for this week? All right. Exactly. And add to drawn customers. And you're just following the exact, you've got the text all supplied and the exact instructions. You're just deciding where you want things to be. But the big thing, but make sure you're importing your styles. That's a good chunk of the points. So make sure you're importing styles either from your week 2 assignment or from the example file. Yeah, let's see if we can see browsing through what my error is. It's right. Was that there? No. Oh, it's right here. I have extra returns. So this column, you see my red plus sign there, but I don't actually have any text there. It's because I've got returns going down to here. So if you ever see that, just get rid of those extra returns. And that'll get rid of that error. All right, guys, let's take a 10-minute break. And when we come back from the 10-minute break, we're going to go into the master pages and the baseline grid that we're going to be using for our assignment. And then we'll go into a full demonstration of the assignment. Okay. Oh, good. That's great, Susan. Yeah, that's important. All right, so I'm going to set a timer here. And I'll see you guys in 10 minutes. Okay, we are back. Can you guys hear me again? Oh, can everyone hear me? Okay, perfect. All right, so let's talk about a couple of very powerful tools, particularly for multi-page documents, that we are going to be using when we do our week 3 and week 4 assignments. I'm going to start by just creating a new document. We're going to talk about something called a baseline grid. So I'm going to make this an 8.5 by 11 document. It's going to be 1 page. It's going to have 3 columns. And 1/2-inch margins is good. And we'll do no bleed. Okay, so here's my document here. And I'm going to do just a little fake magazine article page here, okay? So first of all, I'm going to create some columns of text. And I want these, just like we talked about in week 1, I want these columns linked so the text flows from one column to the next. So I'm going to go to my text frame tool, and I'm going to create a frame for this first column, okay? Then I'm just going to hit escape, so it closes that off. And I'm going to click on this little square, not the very bottom right one, but the one right above that's a little bigger, to make a second text frame. This is now linked to that first one because of how I did that. I'm going to hit escape again. This time I'm going to make a copy of this one. I'm going to hold down Option or I'll just copy it over here. I'm going to link this one the other way by clicking that same box on this second column and then clicking on this third text frame I already made. Okay, so now I have 3 linked text frames. I'm going to come here and I'm just going to go type, and I'm going to tell it to insert some placeholder text to fill those up. Now, let's go here and give this a first line indent, or sorry, a drop cap. Now we'll just do 2 lines. Let's select all the text and give it a first line indent, but not the first. Usually the first paragraph does not have a first line indent, so we'll get rid of that. Okay, so far so good. Now let's throw in here a title. I'm going to make this title go across both columns here. It's going to type in, this is the title of my article. And let's go ahead and just make this nice and big. That looks good enough. Shrink this up like that. I'm going to get rid of this last paragraph of text so I have a little bit of working room here. Now, I'm going to go to an image frame, and I'm just going to throw an image frame right here. And I'm going to go to File and Place and go put an image on here. And let's just do a content aware fit on that. I don't like that one as much. We'll do it like that. Okay, so here I've got this little bit of a rough layout for my article that I've done here. Now, there's a problem with the text and the image that we just talked about today that breaks breaks one of the rules I talked about with lines. Can you guys see what it is? Well, I don't want my text right up here against the bottom of my image. Got no space here. Remember, I want to make sure I've got some space. Yeah. So we're going to use a tool that's going to put some space there. That it's part of what's called a text wrap. Okay. So a text wrap, in order to demonstrate a text wrap, I'm going to just move the image right here for a second. Let's say that I wanted the image right here. Well, the problem is that the text is behind my image, right? I don't want that. So that's what a text wrap is for. A text wrap pushes the text away from behind the image, but it can also be used to push text away from the edges of an image, okay? So if we've selected my image, you'll see I've got a section of my properties panel called text wrap. Right now it's off. This first one wraps text around the bounding box. If I click that, it's now pushed all the text away from behind this. You can see it's going out the bottom of there now. So there's no text behind the image. The next one will do that same thing, but it's the exact same shape as the image. So if I had like a circle image like that, it would do it in a circle. The next one doesn't even let text be on the sides at all, just pushes it above and below. And this one doesn't even let it be below. It just keeps all the text above it, okay? Most common one is that first one, the wrap around the bounding box, which is what we're going to use for this, okay? But I don't want that there. I want it back where it was. So we're going to go there. And I'm going to come up here and I'm going to push that button there to wrap around the bounding box. Now that didn't actually do anything in and of itself because there was no text behind this. But the reason I did that is because I will now want to use these buttons down below it. These buttons down here are called offset spacing. Offset spacing means it's going to push text away from the image. And you've got it from the top, from the bottom, from the left, from the right, or if this is linked, it does them all at the same time. So I'm just going to increase that and watch the text by my image. As I go up, it just pushes that text away a little bit. Okay, so I can just force this to have a little bit of extra space from my text and my image. I can actually shift that down a little bit. And I'm actually going to reduce that offset spacing a tiny bit like so. Okay, so offset spacing. We're actually going to use that in our assignment today. Any questions about using text wrap or offset spacing? Okay. So the next thing I want to look at is this while cleaning this up. Okay. Oh, no problem, Susan. Just watch the rest of the recording when you're done. Let me know if you have any questions. Good luck with it. So going back to the principle of alignment, okay, wanting to align things nicely. One way to align text in a nice way is to be here, is to align it from column to column, okay? Notice that this text in the second column is just, it's coming right in the middle of these two right here. Okay, Susan, I'll be in here from 10 a.m. until noon on Thursday, so you can definitely get me then. So it's sitting right in the middle of those. Where these two are aligning correctly, the reason why is that image is pushing it down, right? So ideally, I would like this to have the lines of text line up with each other all the way across, okay? And we generally do that with body text. You know, with headlines and subheadlines, we're not as, because it's nice, we can do that sometimes, but not as big of a deal. But with body text, it's pretty important. So the way we do that is something called a baseline grid, okay? A baseline grid is a type of a grid that's already built into InDesign. If I turn it on, I come up here and I go to View, and I go to Grids and Guides, and I say Show Baseline Grid. Okay, View, Grids and Guides, Show Baseline Grid. Now, it's not showing anything, and the reason why is the baseline grid only shows when you've zoomed into a certain point. So there it is. See it popping up there. So the baseline grid is just these lines that are going at a set interval, and they're to represent the baselines of our text. Now notice the baselines of the text are not lining up with those yet. It's because we haven't told them to yet. All we're doing is now just seeing the grid that's already there, okay? Now, if I select my text and I come over to my paragraph panel, these buttons down here, this is my baseline grid alignment. The one that's on by default says, don't worry about aligning it to the baseline grid. This one says, align it to the baseline grid. Okay. Now, everyone clear on what we're talking about so far before I want to tell you one other thing before I turn it on. But everyone clear so far? Okay. So, do you remember that leading, when we talked in week one, we talked about the text size and we talked about leading. And if you recall, leading is the space from one line to the next as far as the baselines go, right? So right now it's 12 points size, but it's 14.4 points leading. So that means from the bottom of this line, it's 14.4 points to the bottom of the next line, right? Well, the default setting on my baseline grid is every 12 points. So that's less points than the leading. So that means when I turn on my baseline grid, InDesign is going to try to put every single line of text on a baseline, on one of these grid lines. But the leading is going to say you got to push down at least 14.4 points before you do that. And what I'm going to end up with is this, double spaced. Okay. What's happening is that the leading is pushing the next line down past the next baseline. And so then the baseline grid is popping it down to the one below that. Now, this is a common problem I see people have in the beginning with baseline grids. I just want to make sure you see what causes that in case it happens to you when you're doing your assignment. It just means your leading is bigger than your baseline grid, okay? So here's the solution. I'm going to go ahead and just undo that. You can set the baseline grid to have whatever spacing you want. So you want to set your baseline grid to have the same spacing as your leading. Okay, so again, baseline grid should be set to have the same amount of space as the leading of your body text. So since my leading here is 14.4, I'm going to go to InDesign. Now, again, if you're on a Windows computer, you do this in the Edit menu. If you're on a Mac, it's InDesign menu. Then you go to Preferences. And then we're going to go to a preference called Grids. This grids preference has a section up here for the baseline grid. The part that says increment every is how far apart they are. So if I change this to 14.4 instead of 12 and click OK, now when I turn on my baseline grid, it does not double space it. You'll see it's locked every single one of these lines down onto a grid line. So I have this perfect alignment from side to side for my baseline grid. Okay. So the way we're going to be doing our assignment this week is pretty automated, but I just want to make sure you understand what it's doing. Everyone clear on what a baseline grid is, you know, why we use it, how we use it, any questions about them at all? Because that was the number of my leading. I always, if my leading had been 15, I would have set my baseline grid to 15. If my leading had been 13, I would have set it to 13. I always want my baseline grid to match the leading for my body text. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. All right, let's move on and talk about something called master pages. Now, master pages, we're going to be using these this week too, and master pages are a huge time saver when you're working on a multi-page project, okay? I'm going to set this up to have just one column, but we're going to have 10 pages. And this time I'm going to turn on facing pages. We're going to look at spreads for the first time. So I've got 10 pages with facing pages on, one column in each page, and I'm going to click Create. So this is my document, and this is what spreads are. Spreads puts the pages side by side, just like they would print in a magazine or a book, okay? So this is page 1 at the top, then page 2 is on the left, page 3 is on the right, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, and here's page 10. Okay, so the idea is often when we're designing something like a magazine or it's like you're opening a booklet or something like that, it's very common to have something like images or something cross from one page to the other. So this allows us to design it looking at it as a whole. Okay. Now, the reason why page 1 and page 10 are by themselves is because generally when you're laying out something like this would be the cover, the front cover, and the last one would be the back cover. So that's how it sticks it. It sticks it by themselves. And then these would be the inside pages. Okay. So master pages allow us to basically create a template that will automatically go on all the pages for us. We don't need to manually make it on every page. We can even choose some pages that don't get it. And we can even make multiple master pages, so we can say these pages get this master page, and these pages get this master page, and then whatever we made on those master pages just go just on those pages. So, for example, page numbers, the name of a magazine down at the bottom of the magazine, a banner, something like that that's on multiple pages or all the pages. If we make it in the master pages and then apply it to the pages, it saves us from having to do it to every single page. Okay, so here, let me demonstrate that so you see better what I mean. We deal with the master pages over in the Pages panel. So I'm going to go to my Pages panel. And we looked at the Pages panel briefly last week when we deleted one of the pages of the document and added a new one. Down here in this section of the Pages panel is my document. Okay, so here's all 10 pages of my document. If I double click on it, it jumps to that page in my document. But that's what this section down here is, the document itself. This section at the top is the master pages. And you can see that by default, I already have one called None, and it has a little preview over on the right. And I have one called A Master, and it has a preview of a spread over there on the right. Okay, so A Master is a master page, and None means I don't want any master page applied. So the A Master, anything that's on the A Master would go to any pages that have the A Master applied to it. And guess what? Look at all my pages. See how they all have an A on them? By default, every page already has the A Master applied to it. The only reason it hasn't done anything is there's nothing on the A Master at this point. So let's look at how we can edit that and what it would do. In order to edit the master page, you just go to the preview over on the right of the master page you want to edit. So again, I'm doing the A Master. I just double click on that. And now look, I can't scroll. There are no 10 pages. All I'm looking at is a single spread because I'm no longer looking at my document. I'm looking at the master page. Come double click back on the document. I'm looking at my document. Double click on the master page. I'm looking at the master page. Okay. So you just double click on whichever one you want. Takes you right back and forth. So let's say I wanted some banners at the top of this. I'm going to just make a rectangle here. I'm going to make a copy of that rectangle, put it over here. I'm going to go to this one, and I'm going to fill it blue. Oh, I just did the stroke blue. And on this one, I'm going to fill it pink. There we go. Banners here. Well, look at my preview of my document. I'm going to go double click on my document so we can take a look at it. Every single page has my banners. Quick and easy. I don't have to go do them all on every page. I don't have to worry that they're all the exact same size. I don't have to worry that one of them is not quite aligned right. I just do it on the master page and they're all done for me. Does that make sense so far? Any questions about just that part of it? Okay. All I did, I went to my Pages panel. I went up here to the A Master and double clicked on the preview to the right so that I'm now editing my master page. Like, this is all that's there. You see that? There's no more document. It's just the master. And then I drew whatever I wanted on all the pages. I'm done. That's a great question, Rhonda. I'll show you that next. So, well, actually, I'll show one more thing next, then that. So now I've got on all the pages. Now, what about this? I don't want the banner on the cover. I don't want the banner on the cover, and I don't want it on the back page. Those pages are going to be different. So I'm going to go to None. Click on the little page to the right of that. That's for None. And it's going to drag down the None page onto the front and back pages. Now notice the A is gone on those pages, and so is the banner. Okay, so that's how I would say I don't want this master or any master applied to a page, is drag None to it. Now notice these aren't editable out here. I can't click this, I can't drag it, I can't change the color. It's part of the master page. Okay, I'd go to the master page to edit it. So let's go ahead now. We're gonna look at Ron's question. What if I wanted a different banner on another page? Okay, so that's very common. We want some things on some pages and other things on other pages. I'm gonna go back to my master page and I'm just gonna save time. I'm gonna copy that banner so I have it all ready to paste. And I'm gonna come up here to my Pages panel. I'm gonna click the menu on the right and I'm gonna say I want a new master. It asks me, do I want, it's going to be master B by default, but I could change that if I wanted something else. I could give it a name instead of master if I wanted. I could base it on one of the masters I already had, so it brought those things over too. Change the size, but this is all the way I want it, so I'm just going to click OK. Now I have an A master and a B master. I'm going to come over here and paste that banner on here. Whoops, just made a copy of that there. And let's change the colors. Let's say on this one, I want it green and red. Now here we go, B master and A master. Now I'm going to go back to my document. Any of them that I want the B master on, I just drag the B master to. Make sure you got to do each page. The spread is 2 pages, so I got to do the left and right. There we go. Now my document has no master page on the front or the back, has A masters on pages 2 and 3 and 6 and 7, has B masters on 4 and 5 and 8 and 9, and that is exactly what I get out here. Okay, so there's a lot more you can do with master pages. That's like your basics of master pages. We're not even going to be doing that much with our assignment, but we are going to be using them in the assignment. But again, as you can see, it can save you so much time. I mean, you're doing a 500-page book and they all have to have a little symbol down on the bottom of it. Oh, wow. That just saved you a lot of time, right? Exactly. Exactly. All right. So any questions on master pages before we go on to the assignment itself? Okay. Let's close this up then. Let's go take a look at our assignment. So for our assignment, we are starting a newsletter. It's just like it was in week 1 and 2, where we're not going to do the whole thing this week. The newsletter is 4 pages altogether. We are going to do 2 of the pages this week. Specifically, we're doing page 1 and page 4. We're doing the front cover and the back, and we're saving the spread for next week, okay? But the cool thing is, since we're using styles and we're using master pages, some of the work we do this week is going to make next week's work go that much faster and be that much easier because it's already done, right? So these are the instructions, but I'm going to be demonstrating it. So I'm going to skip over. I'm going to go right to this download. You're going to want to download these assets. This is the download. Now, just like in week 1, when you downloaded the assets for the menu, remember I had the ones you're going to use for both weeks. This does too. This has everything for the whole newsletter. So we won't be using all of this week. We'll just be using the stuff for pages 1 and 4. This file right here, this is newsletter mockup PDF. This is what we're copying. Okay. So we're doing these 4 pages. This week we're doing this page, page 1, and this page, page 4. Okay. So you're going to want to kind of have this open and ready for you to look at while you're working on it, you know, so you can just see that things are looking right. Also in here are Word documents that have the text for the articles, pictures, a graduation ad. This one right here is the banner that goes up at the top. They call that the flag. It goes at the top of the front page. And then there is one file that's the first thing we're going to use. It's called Style Sheet Settings. This has information for setting up our baseline grid and information for setting up our styles. Now this week we're going to be doing it a little different. We're going to set our styles up from the very beginning. We're just going to set them up before we even do anything on the page. And then you're going to see that having those styles set up makes it so much easier and faster to actually lay it out. Okay. So let's start working on it. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my new document. So I'm going to say I want to create new. And I'm looking at the assignment instructions in my other window page, but you'll see these when you do it on yours. It says that it needs to be 8.5 by 11 inches. So that's already set right. The margins have to be 0.5 inches. So make sure it's 0.5 inches, but that's just the top, left, and right margins. The bottom margin is 0.75. So this is a little different. We're doing one that has a different margin. So we need to uncheck that chain and make sure the bottom says 0.75. So this is how your margins should be set. 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, and then the bottom 0.75. Okay. It says that it's going to be facing pages. We're going to do a spread for the first time. So make sure facing pages is checked. It's going to be 3 columns. So increase that to 3. The gutter, which is the space between our columns, is going to be 0.25 inches. And then it's going to be 4 pages long. It does not have a bleed because nothing goes to the edges. So you can just keep the bleed at 0. And so these are all the settings for the document. 8.5 by 11, 4 pages. Facing pages is checked, 3 columns, 0.25 inch gutter. And then in the margins, all of them are 1/2 inch except for the bottom, which is 0.75 inches. Any questions on the setup? All right, let's create that. And here's my document, right? I'm going to go ahead and save this right now. I would recommend saving things early so you don't lose work if something happens. I'm keeping this till next week because we're going to continue on with it next week. So I'm just going to call this, we'll call it week 3 example. Put it on the desktop there. Okay, so now that I have a document, we're going to start with a couple of pre-tasks to make everything else go faster later. I'm going to open up my style sheets setting document. That's this document right here. Style sheet settings. Now, to help you interpret this, let's go over a couple of things. One, this top part, that's setting up the baseline grid. So we're going to do that first. That's what that is. Everything is down here is paragraph styles. Now, the way that people type, like when you're working in this industry, when someone's telling you the size and the formatting they want, the way they do it is they put the size of the type and then a slash and then the leading. So every time here, like see after body, it says 12/15 point. That means size 12, 15 point leading. Okay. Down here in all these headers, 32 point size, 34 point leading. Anytime you see a number slash another number point, that is size slash leading. Does that make sense? Okay. Then we have 4 styles that are basically body type styles. One called body, one called bullets, one called drop cap, one called subheads. And then we have 3 header styles. Okay. So don't worry if that seems overwhelming right now. We're going to do it now one at a time, but just so you're clear what's on here. I'm going to move this over to my other page so I can look at it while I work. So let's start with the baseline grid. Again, the way that I change my baseline grid, I come and click on either InDesign if I'm on a Mac or Edit if I'm on a Windows computer. Whichever one you're in, go to Preferences and Grids. Now, this says baseline grid to 15 points. So that's the increment. I change my increment every to 15 points. Then it says start 0. There's start, just changing that to 0. Then it says relative to top margin. So there's relative to my top margin. What that means is that the baseline grids will be every 15 points apart, that it's going to start looking, that it's going to do the first baseline grid at 0 inches down from the top margin, not from the top of the page. Okay, but it's all spelled out in there. 15-point increment ever, relative to top margin, start 0. That's the whole thing for setting up the baseline grid. I click OK, and I'm done with that. Okay. Now, let's start working on our style sheets. I'm going to go to the paragraph styles here, and I'm going to start off by doing, so last time when I showed you these, I'd like put some text down, then I'd format it the way I wanted, then I'd make a style based on that text I already formatted. This time, we are going to be just making the style based upon the instructions. And this is a common thing. You'll sometimes work for a company and they'll say, oh, this is our style guide. Our body text needs to be this font, this size, yada, yada, so on. And so you know all those before you even get started. So you can just set up the style to begin with. So that's what we're going to do here. I'm going to go to my paragraph styles. Don't do character styles, do paragraph. I'm going to hold down Option or Alt and click New Style. And again, I'm holding down Option or Alt so it'll open up my style settings when I do that. So here's how I'm going to set up my first style. My first one is going to be my body text. So I'm going to type in body. It needs to be based on no paragraph style. If that's anything else, just change it to no paragraph style. Now, I'm going to go to my basic character formats. And this is my stuff like my font and leading and things. So it says that the font needs to be either Times New Roman or Times Roman. So I'm going to go to my font family, and I'm going to go find Times New Roman. Okay. It says that it needs to have a 12-point size, which it already does, but a 15-point leading. So there we go, 12, 15. Then it says it needs to have all the lines aligned with the baseline grid and needs to be aligned to the left. Where I do that is I go to this indents and spacing section over here on the left. Alignment needs to be set to left, which it already is, so I'm good there. And align to grid needs to be changed to all lines. That's it. I've got my body style all ready to go. Click OK, and there's my body style. Now I'm going to make my bullet style. I'm going to hold down Option or Alt, click on that. And if you come over here, see it says bullet says body copy plus, and all these do body copy plus, body copy change. So we're starting with the body copy for all these ones, okay? So the way I do that, first I'm just going to name the style. I'm going to come up here and say, this is bullets. And I just do the based on body. That means it's going to take everything I already set up for body, and then anything I change from here, it'll just add to that, right? So bullets is based on body. Then the only thing that this needs different is I need to go down to the bullets, numbers and bullets. There we go, bullets and numbering right there. I changed the list type to be a bulleted list. And then I'm going to come down here to the left indent, and it says the left indent needs to be 0.25, and it says the first line indent needs to be negative 0.25. Now what those two are setting, they're deciding how far away from the bullet the word is, and how and if the bullet is aligned with the text, or if it's indented and stuff like that. So you don't need to worry about what the settings are, but just, that's what it's doing. It's spacing that out away from the bullet a little bit. Okay. So again, it's alignment left indent 0.25, first line indent negative 0.25, and that's it. That's all I have to change on the bullets one. So I'm going to click OK. Now I'm going to hold down Option or Alt and make a new style. This one is my drop cap style. This also is based on the body style. Make sure you don't base it on bullet style, or you'll get bullets in here and you don't want them. And then it says the only change here is I'm going to go to this section that's called drop caps and nested styles right here. And on the drop cap, it needs to have 2 lines down, 1 character over. And that's it. It's all ready to go. Click OK. Now the subhead ones, I'm going to hold down Option or Alt, make a new style, call this one subheads, base this one on the body style as well. This one, it says I need to change the size to 14 points. So I'm going to click Basic Character Format and change that to 14 points. And it says I need to make it bold. So under Font Style, I'm going to change that to bold. And it says it needs to be red. So over here, I've got a section called Character Color. I'm just going to change that to red. Click OK. So now I have all of my body styles done. I just have to make 3 heading styles. Now, you don't have to do this next step, but I'm going to show you something that that's a good thing to do when working on your own things, helps keep things organized. These are all body styles. My other ones are all heading styles. I'm going to come down here to this folder, and I'm going to create a new style group. This style group, I'm going to call body styles. And I'm just going to stick all these in it. You just drag them down in there. And it's just going to help me keep them organized. Now, again, you don't have to do that. You just need to make the styles. But just so you know, that's available and is a good thing for your own use to help keep your styles organized. I'm going to make a new body style group here. I'm going to call this one headers for me to make my header styles into. Okay. So now I just have 3 more styles to make, my header styles. If you look at the Word document, it says all the headers are created using either Helvetica Bold, Myriad Pro Bold, Arial Bold. They're all aligned left, and they do not snap to the baseline grid. So that's for all of them. The only difference between the 3 is the size, leading, and color. Okay. So I'm going to come over here, go to my paragraph styles panel, hold down Option or Alt to make a new style. I need to make sure this one is based on no paragraph style. If I base it on the if I base this one on the body style, it's going to bring in some things I don't want. So change, because this is a totally different group now. So based on no paragraph style, I'm going to call this one heading 1. In my basic character formats, I'm going to change the font to one of the ones that they have listed. I'll do Helvetica. It needs to be bold, it says. And it says they all need, I'm going to do indents and spacing. It says they all need to be left aligned, which this one is. And they do not snap to the baseline grid, so align to grid needs to be set to none. So that's all right now. Now I'm going to go back to basic character formats, and I'm going to look at the first one on that list. It says it's 32 in size, 34 in leading, and the color it says is blue. So I'm going to go to character color and do this dark blue down there. Click OK. Now I'm going to hold down Option or Alt, make a new style. This one is going to be based upon heading 1. And I'm going to call this one heading 2. Because now it's already brought over all that information that's the same about all of them. So the only thing I need to change is go to basic character formats, change that to 24, change that to 25, and the color is still blue, so I'm good there. Just say OK. Now I'm going to hold down Option or Alt, make a new one, base this one on heading 1, call this one heading 3. And it needs to be 18 and 19 leading. And the color for this one is red. Okay, my styles are all set up. Now, that took a little work, but what you're gonna see is when I actually lay out my document, everything's gonna go much faster because I did it. Okay. Now, the next thing I wanna do, this down here at the bottom of the page is called the folio. This thing that has the line, the student matters, the date, and the page number, that's called the folio. It's on all pages 1 and 3. It's not on page 4. One of the requirements for this assignment is that you use master pages for that. So before I start laying out page 1, I'm going to go to my A master, and I'm going to double click on it so that I'm editing my master pages. I'm going to lay out that folio. I'm just going to take the line segment tool, make a line. I'm making the line a little bit below the bottom of my columns because I don't want it touching my text. And let's go ahead and just make it a little bit thicker. And now I'm going to make a text frame over here. And on the left side of this is the page number and then the month and year. To do the page number, I can't just type a page number because the master page, it's going to be a different page every time, right? The way you make a page number that changes for each page is you go to Type, Insert Special Character, Markers, Current Page Number. Okay, Type, Insert Special Character, Markers, Current Page Number. When I do that, it's just going to put an A there. That's like a placeholder. Just tells me that's where the page number is going to go. I mean, it's space. The example has a little dot next. A really easy way to make that dot is just hold down Option or Alt and press the number 8 on your keyboard. Option or Alt and 8 makes that whole dot. And then the month and year. So we'll call this one October 2019. Now, I'm going to format this. I'm just going to set it to my body style because that has the same formatting that is in the example. But I'm going to go to my alignment. If you remember, we talked about these two alignments on the right. These are for spreads. This one is aligned toward the spine, which is the center, and this one's aligned away from the spine. I want this one away from the spine on both sides, and I'm just going to copy and paste to the other side. So I'm going to change this one to, instead of left aligned, I'm going to say align it away from the spine. Aligning it away from the spine means that when I make a copy of it, here's my copy. And when I drag that copy over here, it's going to be, make sure I get that in the right spot. It's going to be right aligned because it's aligning it away from the spread. It's not worrying about right or left. It's worrying about its position towards the spread. Now, you don't need to do it that way. You can right or left align it if you'd rather, but just, that's an easy way to make sure things can be moved easier. You don't have to worry about it. Just made a copy of my line over there. Oh, there we go. All right, now I'm going to make another text frame. Well, I'll just copy this one. Oh, before I do that, so it's backwards over here. It's kind of annoying, but they put the date first, then Option or Alt 8, and then the page number. So Type, Insert Special Character, Markers, Current Page Number. So that's exactly how it is. All right, so here I'm going to type in Student Matters. And the way that to make this formatted like it is in the picture, align it toward the spine, make it the same font that you made your, don't make that taller there. Make it the same font that you made your headings. So I did Helvetica bold. So if you used Arial, whatever it is, make it the same as your headings. And then if you look, when you're looking at your example, you'll see that the word student is this dark blue, and the word matters is red. And since I aligned that toward the spine, I can just make a copy of it and pop it over here. And it's going to align just the way it's supposed to toward the middle. And there's my folio. So if I set that up in the master pages, when I come back over to my pages panel and double click on my document, you're going to see it's on every single page. And because I did the page numbers that way, you'll see that it's got the correct page number. Okay. Now I don't want it on page 4, so I'm going to go to pages. I'm going to grab the none master, drag that none master to page 4, and now it's gone there. Okay. So that's all my pre-work. It's a lot, but you're going to see everything's going to go faster now since I did that. Any questions on that pre-work before we actually lay it out? Okay. Now the rest of this is not going to take me long, but I am going to go a little bit over on time. It looks like you're welcome to leave if you need to, and just you can come back in when you're doing the assignment to watch that part of it. But just so you know, it's a little bit over, not too much though. Okay, so I'm going to start laying out my first page. The banner, it's called the flag, is right up here at the very top. It's inside the margins. So I'm going to go to my files. I'm going to find the Student Matters header. It's a Illustrator file. Yeah, we can wait for a minute. I don't have a lot of time, but we can meet for a minute, yeah. All right, so I'm just going to drag this on here. It's already the exact right size. I don't even need to make a frame for it. So it's the same size. If I just drag that file over here into InDesign, click once to put it on there, and I can just pop it up in the margins, and it's right ready to go. Okay, so no resizing it, don't drag it, just put it in there, and you're done. Underneath that, I have a headline that runs across 2 columns. That's for an article called How to Succeed in a Difficult Class. So I'm going to open a Word document that's in my downloads called How to Succeed in a Difficult Class, and there's my article. I'm just going to copy and paste the headline from that. I'm going to make a text, to go to my text tool. I'm going to make a text frame that runs across 2 columns here. Zoom in a bit so we can see what we're doing. I'm going to paste that in there. Now, I'm going to go to my styles and apply heading 1 to that. There we go. Now, if we look at the actual thing, I'm not going to dot grades for this sort of thing, but just so you know, like, see how succeeds the last word on the line 1? If I want to make that exactly like the example, I can just put my cursor before in and do a shift return to soft return that to the next line. So, headlines in place. The next thing under the headline is an image. The image, if you look at this, goes across these 2, but the article's below that. Now I'm going to make this a little easier. I'm going to do the article text first and then do the image and do a text wrap. The article does not go to the bottom of the page. You see it goes down almost the bottom, but probably about 1/5 of the way from the bottom. So I'm going to grab my type tool, and I'm just going to make text frames that run the whole height of this, like so. Not to the bottom though. I'm just going to run it down to, I'll run it down to 8 inches. I can adjust that later if I need to. I'm going to hold down Shift and return, or sorry, I'm going to hold down Option or Alt, and I'm going to drag a copy of that text frame over there. Make sure you're aligning your text frames with the guidelines for the columns. I'm just perfectly in there. Mine was a little bit off. There we go. And I'm going to link these. Click that little square, click on this one, and now they're linked. Now I'm going to go grab the rest of the article. I'm going to copy that, just paste it in there. Now this is ready for me to format it. Again, my styles are already set. I do need to get rid of a couple of things that shouldn't be here. I need to get rid of this extra tab and these bullets, these fake bullets that are before my text so that I don't have 2 bullets when I apply the bullets to it. So just clean this up a little bit. Also, when I look at the example, I can see there are no spaces between these paragraphs. So I'm going to get rid of these extra returns. Now, I'm going to start off by selecting all my text. I did that by going edit, or well, by going, I did a keyboard shortcut, but you can go to edit and select all, or Command A or Control A does that. Select all my text. I'm going to go to my styles, make sure body's applied to that. It is, great. I'm going to go into my first paragraph and apply the drop cap to that. I'm going to select the text that is my bullets. It starts with talk and runs down to outcome. I'm going to apply bullets to that. And my text is all formatted. Now I've got an image, and the image runs just under the headline. It goes part way into this column, about like so. I'm going to go File, Place, go to my assets. I'm looking for the one with the same name, How to Succeed. Open that. I'm going to tell it to fill the frame proportionally right here. And now I've got my image placed. But of course, I've got a problem. My text is behind my image. So we're going to use that text wrap we talked about. Select this. Turn on my text wrap that says Wrap Around Bounding Box. Pushes all that text away. But I've got a problem that's right up against my image. So I need to increase my offset spacing. I'm going to use 0.125. And that has pushed that away from there. Now, that pushed my text out of the article. Here's a good way to kind of know where to go with this. Look at where it goes in the example. It's got the whole first bullet point, and then it's got 2 lines of the second bullet point there. So if I take this first frame and I drag that down to where I'm seeing that much, and you might have to fine tune it. Yours might be placed a little different, but that's a good starting point. I can match that one. And look, that got so close. The problem is that this image is keeping these down a little bit. I'm going to just pop that image up a tiny bit. Bring that up like so. So close still. Let's pop that image up a tiny bit. And again, you can just fine tune these until things are fitting the way that you want them to fit. There we go. Now they're lining up at the bottom. See, they're both the exact same length. And I've got that all wrapped around the image. Okay. First image is all done. Any questions about anything that I've done so far? First article is done, I should say. Okay. Let's do the second article then. That's this one over here on the right. Notice it has a gray background behind it. Also notice the text is not right up against the edges of that shape. It's got what's called an inset spacing. It's the opposite of an offset spacing where things are being pushed in. I'm going to show you, earlier I did that by just making another rectangle behind it, but I'm going to show you a way to do that that's even easier. I'm just going to create a rectangle that fills this whole column. Now I'm going to fill it the color that I need it to be. It's this dark gray color. This is the drop cap here, India, where the D is going down 2 lines. Okay, so I'm going to go here. I'm going to fill this, and here's an easy way to get the color you want. I'm going to fill it with black, and then I'm going to click here on the color panel, and I'm going to set the percentage to 25%. That gives me a nice light gray. Okay. So it's got this gray fill, and then it also has a red stroke. So I'm going to come here and give that a red stroke. Okay, so I've got my background shaped the way I want it. Now let's put some text in there. The article for this one is Cyber Aware Tip. So I'm going to go to my downloads and look for Cyber Aware Tip. And for this one, I am just going to, let me pull up my example again, make sure I'm remembering this right. Yeah, I'm just going to copy and paste all the text to start off with, including the headline. So I'm just copying all that text. And if you go to your type tool and click in this rectangle you made, it converts it to a text frame, and you can paste your text in there. Okay, so now the first thing I want to do before I format this It's right up against that edge. We were just talking about that. Here's how I can get the inset spacing. Push it away from the edges. That same place where we did the vertical alignment earlier, you go to Object and Text Frame Options. So earlier we did this vertical justification. What I want this time is inset spacing. I want to give that all, I'm using 0.125 for my inset and offset for this. So I'm just going to set that to 0.125 and click OK. And look at that. It's no longer letting it get right up against the edge. Okay. Now let's format this. Looking at the example, I can see that this cyber-aware tip headline looks very similar to How to Succeed in Difficult Class, but it's a little bit smaller. So that makes it heading 2. Okay, but it's also centered. So after doing heading 2, I just need to center it. Now, there's a little bit of space between those two. I'm just going to do an extra return because that's how they do it throughout this one. Like I taught you last week, you normally don't. It's okay to use extra returns here. My first paragraph has a drop cap. So I'm going to go to my paragraph styles and click drop cap. This one here is red, but it's the same font. That makes it subheads. It's not one of the headings, it's subheads. Okay, make sure that body is applied to all of it. Mine already has body applied to all of it. And that's ready to go. Last thing I need to do with that article is stick a picture down at the bottom. Now notice this picture has padding as well between it and the edges of that shape. The cool thing about when you set an offset or inset spacing, the little guidelines that pop up to tell you when things are centered will pop up in here to tell you when you're at the place with the inset spacing. When you're dragging this, when I get to the right side, it's really hard to see on the video, but there's a light green line that pops up right there, and it kind of locks into place, like feels a little bit like it's popping in. That tells me I'm at my inset spacing. I'm going to go down until it pops there. And then I'm going to go to this left side and just adjust that to make sure it's in the inset spacing, if it is. And now you can see it's perfectly aligned with my text because it's locked in with those inset spacing guides. So now I go File, Place, find the matching picture, which is Cyber Aware Tip. And I'm going to go ahead and tell that one to fit there. Second one is done. So you can see how having these styles is making formatting my text go really fast. I just click the one that it's supposed to be and I'm done. Doing that pre-work is saving me a lot of time here. The only thing left to do on page 1 is the table of contents. Now there's a little dotted line up above that. So I'm going to do 2 things here. I'm going to start by putting a text frame here for my table of contents to go in. I'm just going to go out of, this one's not quite aligned to the left again. I'm being very nitpicky. I won't be this much so with yours, but I want to make sure that's right on the column guide for me. Okay. Now I'm going to come here and I'm going to go to my line segment tool, and I'm just going to run a line that goes straight. I'm holding shift to keep it straight. And I'm going to go ahead and give it a bit of thickness. I'm going to set it to red. And then I'm going to click on the word stroke. And I'm going to change the type to dotted. Okay. And I can just increase that till it looks about right. And there's my dotted line. Okay, no problem, Tanya. Thanks for coming. So there's my dotted line. So the next thing I need to do is my table of contents. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to go, there's actually a document in your download called Table of Contents. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to paste it in here. Okay. And now I'm just going to format it. Looking at the example, I can see that this part here, the word Table of Contents, is red and it's a different font. So what it is it's heading 3. Heading 3 is that red and different font, okay? These down here are bold. So I'm just going to change those to bold. Otherwise, they're the body style, but bold. Now notice there are page numbers and leaders here, but I don't have any, whoops. I don't have any in my text. I need to put those in myself. So I'm going to start by setting my tabs and leaders. I'm going to select the text frame, go to type, tabs. This is just what we did last week. I'm going to set my tabs. Let's come click over here, maybe 4.5 above the ruler. And I'm going to make my leader a period. I can close that now, and I can come down in here and just hit tab. And the first one is page 1. Go on the next line, tab, page 1, tab, page 2, tab, page 3, tab, page 4. And that's all done. Now, notice the table of contents is getting pretty far away from my text there. That's because this text down here is locked to the baseline grid and this one is not. So there's a couple of ways that I could fix that. Easiest way is just shrink your text frame down a little bit. Until it's got that where you want it. Oh, I just pushed one off the edge though. Don't want to do that. Yeah, that's better. All right, page 1 is completely done. Page 2 is really, really fast and easy. Page 1 is definitely the hard one, but any questions on anything that I just did there to get page 1 where it needs to be? And if you want to see compared to the example, you can see that what I have is virtually identical. All right, so let's do page 4 really fast. Again, page 4 is a piece of cake. If you look at page 4 of the example, it just has this graduation ad that is within the margins and this address. The graduation ad is already set to be the right size. So all you need to do is just drag the graduation ad down onto your document, click to place it there, and then just move it into place in the margins. And we're done. Then we're going to do a text frame here in the first column. And we're going to go to my download, and there's a Word document there called Mail Panel Information. It has the address in it. I'm going to copy that, paste it in there, make sure that we are using the body style on that, which we are. Now, you can stop there if you want. I'm going to show you, if you want it to be exactly like the example, if you look at the example, I'm not going to dock any grades. You can stop right there and be done. But if you look at the example, there's a little bit of an indent from the edge of that to this. So if you want it to be exactly like the example, just select this text frame, go to your paragraph panel, and give it a left indent of 0.125. And there we go. Page 4 is done. So you can see page 1 is by far the most work. Page 4 is fast and easy. So this is what it should look like when you're turning it in. Page 1 is done. Page 2 and 3 only have the folios on it, and that's because they're part of the master pages. So put them there automatically. And then page 4 is done and does not have the folio. So from this point, all I need to do is make sure it's saved, which I already did. So I'm going to go to File, and then I'm going to package it. Click Package. Click Package. Click OK. Make sure that gets all packaged up. And then I'm going to go to my package. Here it is right here, this folder. And you need to make sure you're zipping the whole folder. Just click the front, the whole folder itself. Right click on that and choose Compress. And there is a completely done week 3 assignment from beginning to end. So any questions at all on the week 3 assignment? Now, if anyone's typing, keep typing question, but while you're typing, I went through that pretty fast, but the reason why is it's recorded. So when you go into the recording, you can just pause it, do like one step, pause it, recreate what I did. If you're running into problems, remember we're gonna have our multi-session from 10 to noon on Thursday. I can help you out with any of them you're having. You've got all the other multi-sessions as well, and you've got a learning coach as well. And so you can definitely get help on it. But just make sure, just bring up this recording while you're working and just go through a little bit at a time. And that is, as long as you just do what I just did, it's going to work out perfectly. And the nice thing is when you're doing it, it's going to start to click into your memory better. And so the next time you need to do this, it'll be easier. You'll remember how you did it for this one and have those tools available to you. All right. So any last minute questions before we call it a day? All right, guys. Rhonda, if you want to hang out after, I can take a look at that. If you need to go, that's fine. But otherwise, I can take a look at what you were asking about for your assignment for last week. Otherwise, thank you guys so much for joining me at the live session. I definitely really appreciate having you here. And I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your week. And I will look forward to seeing you guys next Tuesday. Thank you. You too, India. All right. So Rhonda, you can turn on your mic if you want, Rhonda. And do you want me to pull that up and we'll take a look at it? I'm going to turn off the recording.